Hey folks, today on Two Kinds of Music, we talk about a great band with a kind of dumb name. Okay, so today we're taking a look at 3 albums by the British rock band Unicorn. And I'm just not a really big fan of that name, and I don't think they were either. Before they were called Unicorn, they were called The Late, and I think they had a few other names. And reading the liner notes here, the label didn't like the name The Late, and so they kind of just all agreed on Unicorn for some reason, but I've read that even some of the members of the band weren't really into that name, and I can see why. It's just not very good. It's not very representative of the kind of music that they would play. So the band consists of Ken Baker on guitars and keys and vocals, Pete Perrier on drums and vocals, Pat Martin bass, mandolin, and vocals, and Kevin Smith on guitars. I think Unicorn, the name, it kind of makes them sound more like an old like Tyrannosaurus Rex or T-Rex or some other kind of Ren Fair fairy folk band or something like that, when really they had way more in common with Graham Parsons and that kind of style of cosmic country, the Flying Burrito Brothers or the Byrds' Sweetheart of the Rodeo. Unicorn also has an interesting Pink Floyd connection with David Gilmour. So David Gilmour heard them after their first album came out, and he really liked them, and he ended up producing their next 2 albums, and he produced half of their 4th album. He played lap steel on a couple tracks on each of the albums, and he also covered one of their songs on, I believe, his first solo album. I also read that a couple members of the band would also end up helping Kate Bush record her first single. So today, I think people would probably classify Unicorn as dad rock, and I have no problem with that. I mean, I'm definitely old enough to be a dad, maybe a grandpa. Yeah, some of my friends are grandpas and they're younger than I am. But yeah, I think they would be called dad rock. Real kind of laid back, low key, mid-tempo kind of FM rock with a really cool kind of cosmic country vibe that I am super, super into. I think Unicorn is a great band to throw on a nice kind of sunny weekend afternoon after you have done all of your chores and it's just time to relax, or maybe a happy hour band. Throw them on, kick back with some friends and a couple of beers, and it's just a good time. It's like good vibes music. Okay, the first album we'll take a look at today is Blue Pine Trees from 1974, and that is produced by David Gilmour. And I think this is their most cosmic country sounding album. You know, they don't really sound like a British band at all. They sound very much like an American band. The only real British thing about them, I think, is their vocal style. They kind of have that softer, laid back British vocal style. And all 3 of these albums, or at least 2 of them and half of the 3rd one, sound amazing. And a lot of that has to do with David Gilmour's production. He's a really good producer. They have super tight drums, killer vocals, laid back, slinky, kind of cosmic country guitar, and really solid bass work. A good mix of electric piano, some organ, and also some mandolin are used to kind of fill up some of the space in the background. The first 2 tracks on Blue Pine Trees totally set the mood and tone, and those are Electric Night and Sleep Song. When I first heard this album for the first time, those 2 tracks completely sold me. I was kind of instantly a fan of this band, and I couldn't wait to hear more. I just love that kind of cosmic country vibe, that kind of 70s country rock vibe, especially when the tracks are as laid back and as groovy as these are. Whenever I listen to this album, I am instantly in a good mood. This is good vibes music, especially with that soft vocal style. Like I said earlier, the vocal style really is the only British thing that I can think of about this band. The track Rat Race picks things up with some pretty funky rhythm guitar and a more upbeat rhythm section. The track Holland brings the sound back into that kind of cosmic country territory. It's very simple. There's really nothing flashy about this band, but they write really killer tunes. You know, sometimes you turn to a band for some great guitar playing or just outstanding bass work or drums. Or sometimes you turn to a group for really killer vocals or lyrics. And I don't think Unicorn has any of those elements, just everything is solid. Everything is as good as it needs to be. And it's music that is more than the sum of its parts. The track The Farmer is one of the tracks that features Gilmour on the lap steel. And lap steel and pedal steel are two of my favorite instruments. My favorite instrument of all time is the pedal steel. I just absolutely love that instrument. I tried to play it for a while. I wanted to learn it, but man, it's like the hardest instrument ever. You play with like both knees, both feet, both hands. Yeah, I just could not wrap my head around how to play the pedal steel. The lap steel is much simpler, and I think David Gilmour's lap steel work is really nice on this album. And then finally, the title track, Blue Pine Trees, it's just a really perfect representation of how great Unicorn is. It has everything I love about the band. It sounds fantastic, great vocal harmonies, and just a really kind of laid-back vibe. So yeah, Blue Pine Trees, 1974, fantastic album. Okay, next up is their third album, the second album we're taking a look at, and that is Too Many Crooks in 1976, again produced by David Gilmour. I think this album is a little more upbeat than Blue Pine Trees. It's a tad more jammy, more slinky. I think if this album had come out in the late 90s or maybe early 2000s, it probably would have done really well on the kind of alt-rock radio stations. You know, if it had come out along with things like The Shins or a Band of Horses or Pedro the Lion, I think fans of those bands would get a lot out of Unicorn. The opening track, Weekend, is fantastic. It's so groovy. Maybe that track is one of the reasons why I associate them with kind of weekend chill music. You know, throw that on and I instantly just want to be kicking back outside with a beer and maybe talking to a friend or just having a nice chill time in the backyard. It's a real laid back groove with some of that great cosmic country guitar. The track Ferry Boat, I think with Ferry Boat you can kind of hear the seeds of early 80s college rock or even stuff like Toad the Wet Sprocket or Counting Crows or some of that early alt country. I bet the guys from Dawes are pretty big fans of this band and this album. The track Keep On Going is really a full-on kind of country rock Americana. It's probably the band's most straightforward country rock song, and it's a really good one. Disco Dancer, that's a song that I'm not a big fan of. It was one of the singles from Too Many Crooks, and it's okay. It's really poppy, it's really bouncy. It kind of has this kind of cheesy string part. It's not terrible, but it's not great either. I never skip it. I rarely skip songs on albums if I'm at least somewhat enjoying them. I am an albums guy. I like to listen to everything. And in context, I think Disco Dancer is great, but I would never use Disco Dancer as the song to introduce people to this band. The track Easy is a really nice acoustic number. I think the vocals really shine here. I'm a really big fan of their soft, laid-back vocal style. It's something that I dig a lot. This is great driving music. So this is kind of that perfect music for a road trip, you know, over those golden hills of the Central Valley of California, maybe heading over to San Luis Obispo, heading over to the Central Coast, passing through all the orange orchards and Casa de Fruta and that kind of thing. It reminds me of that geographical location. And then the last track we'll talk about here is No Way Out of Here, and this is the track that David Gilmour covered for his first album. You know, I had that album. It's one of the early albums I bought on vinyl back in the day. And that was probably my favorite track on that David Gilmour album. I had no idea it was a cover. It would have been nice to have discovered Unicorn back then. I imagine it was probably much harder to hear Unicorn in the early 90s. I don't know if their stuff was being put out on CD then, or maybe I could have found some old vinyl records of this stuff. But yeah, that was my favorite song. So my favorite solo David Gilmour song from that album is actually a Unicorn song. And hey, that is pretty cool. Okay, so the final album today is from 1977, and that is One More Tomorrow. And this is actually 4 tracks are produced by Muff Winwood, Steve Winwood's brother, Muff. His brother got named Steve, he got named Muff. I don't know, is Muff a nickname? I have no idea. And then the rest of the tracks are produced by David Gilmour, and I think the David Gilmour tracks sound a lot better than the Muff Winwood tracks. So this is definitely my least favorite of these three albums, but there's still a lot to like on here. It's probably about as close to standard kind of AOR, FM rock, or maybe yacht rock that I get that I can like. I'm not sure if people would consider this yacht rock, but it has a little hint of that, I think. And I'm not a huge fan of yacht rock. But yeah, so the first four tracks produced by Muff Winwood, and I just don't think they sound as good as the David Gilmour produced tracks. And not to disparage Muff Winwood, I don't really know the guy. I don't know much about him, but looking at his credits, you know, he has some great production credits. He worked on some albums from Dire Straits and Sparks, and he was also a part of signing Sade, and those are all things I like. I love Dire Straits. I love Sade. Sparks, I am hit or miss on. I enjoy some of their stuff. I don't love all of their albums, but that's enough of that tangent. So the first track, I think one of the issues with the track is or the album is that it starts off with two covers, and sometimes that leads me to believe that the band just isn't really secure or really confident in what they're offering. So it starts off with a cover of Have You Seen the Rain? Of course, John Fogerty. And it's all right. I'm not a huge fan of that track, of that song to begin with, and I don't think they really add anything that changes it or elevates it to any significant degree. And then there's also another cover called Slow Dancing, and that is written by Jack Timshin of the Funky Kings. I know absolutely nothing about the Funky Kings or Jack Timshin, but I think Slow Dancing is a pretty cool track. It's a nice little ballad. I think there's like some mellotron in the background, which kind of gives it a Beatles-esque vibe. Okay, track 5, British Rail Romance. That starts the David Gilmour run, so Gilmour produces the rest of the tracks, and I think it immediately sounds better than the 4 tracks before. It has more of that cosmic country vibe from the first 2 albums that we took a look at today. And it just sounds tighter, especially the bass and the drums. Gilmour, I don't know what he did. I don't know the engineer he was working with, but he got some really great bass and drum tone from Unicorn. So One More Tomorrow, the title track, I think it's great. It captures a lot of the essence that I love about Unicorn. It has some very subtle harmonica work. It has more of that cosmic country vibe. The track's So Hard to Get Through starts with some pretty layered guitar work and has some killer bass and drum work. This might be instrumentally, I think, one of their best songs. It's super cool, it's super tight, and it really is crazy how much better these Gilmour produced tracks sound than the Winwood produced tracks. So the track The Night, nice little country ballad, probably the most country, the cosmic country track on this album. It has a nice little organ part to fill up some of the space. And I think the final track, Magnolia Avenue, is my favorite track on the album. Killer bass line, killer bass tone, and I wish the whole album sounded more like this track. It has a really cool arrangement. So if you've never heard Unicorn and you decide you want to get into them, they do have 4 albums. Their first album sounds quite a bit different. I haven't spent hardly any time listening to their first album. It's these 3 albums, and this little box set here, Unicorn, the recordings 1974 to 1979, is fantastic. Great little box set. I'm a huge fan of these little CD box sets because they pack a ton of music for a great price, and they don't take up a lot of room. You remember back in the 80s and the 90s, box sets were just huge. You had these huge things. So I'm glad they started making these little box sets. We get some really nice liner notes written by various people. We get all 3 of these albums that we talked about today. And we also get a bonus album full of all kinds of live and unreleased stuff. And each of the albums also does have a number of bonus tracks. And some of them aren't quite good. Some of them are live. Some of them are studio outtakes. So all in all, one of my favorite little box sets. I love it. And I really do like this band, Unicorn. They just have that kind of quintessential 70s FM laid-back rock sound that I really dig a lot of the times. And I think I appreciate it more as I get older, and so that's probably why I would call this dad rock. You don't have to be a dad to like dad rock. but I get a lot out of music like this. I get far more out of music like this today than I would have, growing up in the 80s or 90s. It just kind of speaks to me more, It's kind of unassuming. It's not doing anything brashly or nothing's in your face. Everything is just where it needs to be. Everything is as good as it needs to be. You don't get any ripping guitar solos or just crazy drum parts or bass parts or, kind of vocals that are really pushing the limit of the human voice. No, everything is chill. Everything is laid back. It's just all about those kind of good vibes, perfect music for a nice sunny weekend afternoon where you have nothing to do except relax and listen to some good music. So, all right, I hope you enjoyed this episode on Unicorn. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.